and welcome to a conversation with the Artists of Bloom. My name is Jerry. I'm the creative director here at Awakenings, and it has been a joy to get to know the artists and the artwork in Bloom. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We are so glad you are here. As we get started this evening, we'll begin with a land acknowledgement from Awakenings Executive Director, Laura Kinter.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to welcome returning artists and new artists. I would like to start by mentioning that Awakening sits on the stolen land of the Sioux, Miami, Potawatomi, and Kickapoo and Peoria tribes. As settlers of this unceded territory, we as an organization want to name and respect its original inhabitants. We cannot continue our work to dismantle sexual violence as a weapon of systemic oppression without acknowledging the colonialism we have inherited. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Before we dive into our conversation tonight, here are some housekeeping items. First, we are using a service called Rev to provide closed captioning for tonight's event. If you would like to follow along with captioning with live transcribed captions, please click the up arrow next to closed caption at the bottom of your screen and select Show Subtitle. This transcription is happening automatically through Rev, so we apologize if it is not 100% accurate. For tonight, we have the chat function turned on. We would love for you to respond with any words of affirmation or hellos to each other as attendees and artists. You can select if you want your message to be visible to all attendees and artists or by only the Artists and Awakening staff. We are planning for a few minutes at the very end for a Q&A, so please put any questions you have for the artists or Awakenings in the Q&A section by clicking on the Q&A button. If an artist or any of us hosting has a technological issue, and we have all probably been in a Zoom room where this has happened by this point, please bear with us. We will keep going as best we can. All right, if we were in our gallery space tonight in Chicago, in the Ravenswood neighborhood, right now I would point you all in the direction of our breathe room for anyone who wanted a place to decompress or to sit with an advocate. So for tonight, we have a phone number you can call. We will place the number to reach our advocate, McKenna, in the chat box now, along with a list of virtual resources. So we are here tonight to have a conversation with the artists in Bloom. This means we will be talking about sexual violence, and that includes different ways people define this term and different views on how to be an ally, an advocate, a survivor, and other identifying terms. So the ways in which our artists and those of us at Awakenings choose to identify might not quite fit with how you as our audience choose to identify. We all participate in making a space a brave space of listening, of speaking, and we certainly hope of celebrating being together across time zones and distance tonight to celebrate this art. Okay, with all the house rules set for tonight, let us dive into the conversation. I hope everyone has had a chance to view Bloom on our website and to watch the video tour of the gallery on YouTube. If not, please do so afterwards tonight and in the coming weeks. I will be very briefly introducing our audience tonight, so please do take a look at their bios and the booklet on the Bloom website for more and to support their work elsewhere out in the world. So first, welcome to Maddie Grotuil. Maddie is a second-year MFA candidate at Washington University in St. Louis. Her practice consists of material studies and experiments with fibers, textiles, wax, latex, and household items. And welcome to Miguel Barros. Miguel Barros holds a degree in interior architecture and design from IADE in Portugal. He has designed china for Vista Alegre after winning the National Design Award in Portugal in 1984. He has lived all over the world, finding inspiration in all the places he has lived, and now lives in Calgary in Alberta, Canada. Welcome, Miguel. Next, welcome to Ayoden. Ayoden is a visual artist who is more willing to call herself an escapist and an art shaman. She graduated from Oberlin College with a bachelor degree in visual arts and from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with a master degree in fashion, body, and garment. Welcome, Ayoden. And now welcome to Shreya Shakar. Shreyash is a poet, a qualified painter, a practicing Hindustani classical musician, and an aspiring researcher in microelectronics and nanotechnology. He currently divides his time between Kolkata and Paris, where he is currently pursuing his doctoral studies. Welcome, Shreyash. And welcome to Mariken Kurhias. Mariken is a Dutch born artist. Her work encompasses drawing, painting, and sculpture. She is a 2020 recipient of a Foundation for Contemporary Arts, or the FCA, Emergency Grants COVID-19 Fund grant, and the Marjorie Currit Award winner for Contemporary and Non-Traditional Art. So, welcome to you all, and thank you for being here tonight. Each of you have created beautiful artwork, and it has been so lovely to see your pieces next to each other in the exhibit, as though the pieces are already having a conversation with each other. It has certainly sparked my own creativity, and in this year, with so many challenges, I can't overstate the importance of finding that creativity and the beauty in seeing art talk to each other. So, I'm wondering where each of you are finding creativity this year. What has sparked your creativity recently, and maybe what was most satisfying in creating your art that is on exhibit in Bloom? And Miguel, I'm hoping you would start us off, perhaps.
Okay. Hi. First of all, I'd love to thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure, it's an honor to be part of this project. You guys are so fantastic always with me, so thank you so much. And well, actually, this year, this very weird year, uh, it has this effect to me since we are all, the world is completely in this prison. Um, Actually, what it happened to me is I feel much more open to my creativity and to see and to work the things I love because I have a lot of time for myself, for my paintings, for my colors, for my pigments, etc. And I think at the same time, it's a kind of a privilege to use this time for we all to know better each other and with ourselves and to understand what we actually want for our life, to stop a little because the world was so in this rush, so crazy, and at the same time in this terrible thing that happens right now with the COVID and everything, it's a good moment, and I speak for myself, for my creativity to improve it and to have time for me. The thing is about the exhibition, the Bloom exhibition, it was such a pleasure to do this for paintings I did for you guys because it gave me the opportunity to work and to work the way I like. And this is what I mean is I love to get a piece of canvas of wood or anything and destroy everything and put away and, you know, be to put all my strength, my hate, my love, everything there. And then to try to reborn from the ashes, if you want an, an image like that, um, to recreate something like sublimating suffering, like a metaphor of this suffering that the people victim from this kind of crimes, terrible crimes of violence, sexual violence, and like this metaphor to try to apply here in my work through the destruction to do something good for their lives in the future and to do and my canvas to show like an example of okay, this guy destroyed everything but now it's reborn in something else that makes sense, and this is my idea about this good project that you there I mean.
Yeah, I had the same kind of response to this chance to be at home most of the time, making constantly. And it was kind of also a point to find balance in my practice where of the heavier subject matter of studio work, but also making art that I enjoy making and to look at, and just the keeping up with creativity. And like when quarantine happened, a professor told me that we're so lucky to be artists during this time. And I thought that was unfair at the time because I was not pleased about being in quarantine. But I think it's true because we have our creative outlet. We have our way that we're processing how we're living life right now, and that's our whole life. And so I think that it is a privilege to be an artist right now because we can process it, express it, and kind of deal in a productive way. So yeah.
Hello. Uh, I think we are living in such unprecedented times that we sort of have never seen, and defining our sort of equations with the world, how to express ourselves, how to deal with the devastations around us. And art, I think the objective of art is to provoke, either to silence or to some kind of response. And the process of making of art, it's not one singular strand of emotion. It is also enriching, it is also frustrating, it is also uplifting, everything together. And this sort of inward journey happened for me because I was in quarantine, and sort of sparked a different kind of creativity, resulting in pieces that wouldn't have occurred if I wasn't sort of in a physical space that's closed, and which forced me to have uh, to look inside and try to find out how exactly do I express myself and put my work out there. And it's very cathartic to have that. As I agree with Maddie that it's so fortunate to be living as artists in this time of the world.
Yeah, it's been really beautiful to see all of your work and all of the creativity, and especially hearing kind of when the artwork was created. I know some of it was created very recently during quarantine, and some of it was created even before quarantine. So it has been really beautiful for me, kind of as a curator, um, to see the different timelines and see how all of this work is still speaking to each other, even though maybe it was birthed at very different times and when the world looked very different from each other, and yet they are all still kind of talking to each other together.
Oh, hey. So I don't know if that is appropriate to say so, but before all these bad things happen, I've been spending a lot of time on my own. So I don't feel my life changed that much. But as you know, I work basically with ceramics and porcelains. So for me, I just started to realize, oh my God, how fragile and delicate my works are because I have to make them at home and take them to the studio for them to be fired. So they are so easily to be broken. I think that is one thing that I got super impacted during this quarantine. Um, and so for the next question, so what I'm super satisfied with creating on this platform of blooming, I think I find that security and sense of safety for creating all these works related to sexual violence. I was always asked that why you're so full of hatred and being so angry and aggressive on this topic, but when it comes to a platform that everyone has a devotion to this same topic, I think it's quite important for artists to find that courage and sense of security to speak and create.
Beautiful. I Okay, I want to move us into kind of our second question. So thank you for kind of moving us on that way, Odin. I'm wondering for the rest of you, how does the artwork in Bloom fold into your larger work? I know, Odin, you just said you create a lot of ceramic and that is very different right now. So I'm wondering kind of how does this work in Bloom fold into the rest of your work? Should people expect to see similar materials, similar themes, gestures, and the rest of your work, or does this feel a little different?
I can answer that. So this is actually quite different from the rest of my work now, um, which I've used a lot of frames before, and I have a frame in this wall sculpture, and I think it was, but I would break the frame and then repair the frame and then break it again, and it was this process of kind of, I guess, feeling boxed in. And interestingly, this is kind of like I find that this is the more marginalized work in my greater body of work. And so that's a net self-censorship there, and kind of shame there is something that I'm working on as well. So my kind of boundaries for my practice are kind of fluctuating right now, I'd say, and kind of broadening a bit. And so it's going more this direction, but this was kind of like a step into that. So I think that's really exciting that this is, I don't know, I think in the greater art world, art that's art of this subject is not always welcomed. And so I think that only happens from having spaces that do welcome this expression, and that it is in so many different ways, because like you said, Eodan, that you're angry, and I never display anger in my work at all, and people are like, why are you not angry? And so it's such a variety of ways that people are processing and expressing and creating through this, through healing. So I think that yeah.
So I try always in my work, since I have these remote memories of me, and I am not completely different when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, and I guess that's the work I do and the things I do, like this project I did for you, the Bloom exhibition. It's something that it was always present in my life, like a kind of compensation of a certain suffering or something that I felt it was not right, it was not good for me. How could I manage it and change it for myself to feel better, to feel happier, to feel like um, call for? Because it's impossible to live without suffering. It's absolutely impossible. But the thing, and I think the great miracle of life is that you can change this kind of suffering using the tools you have, any kind of tools, writing, being kind with other, doing what else you want or else you are able to. In my opinion, I decided to painting because through the paintings, through the colors, the shapes, and the everything, it's a way that I found to myself to feel in a happy world against that reality that is always there. So I think that in your in this your foundation, Awakening Foundation, that you caring always about the suffering and about so many terrible things in life, that dark side of life. I think that for sure you can find and you can share amazing experience and amazing people that are sharing with all of us great experience and great lessons of life, and to help us to do and to improve ourselves in life, to each other, to ourselves, and to the others. And through my work, I always try to do the best for me, but it's a kind of approach the other, understand? Like share my good vibe, okay, to the others, because I think the most important thing in life is share, 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 and love.
I do want to ask now, as Awakenings turns 10 years old this year in April, we turn 10 as an organization, and our mission has always been to make visible the creative expression of survivors of sexual violence. And Awakenings is certainly not the only group of people using the arts and kind of creativity in general as a broad term to engage with the conversation around sexual violence. So I'm wondering, for all of you, how do you see art participating in conversations and in community around surviving sexual violence, either as a survivor or as an ally and advocate? And or if you aren't seeing it, how can art participate if people aren't seeing it? And I want to actually ask Shreyash if you would start us off on this.
I'll sort of answer the previous and this question together so that I think for me, because I write and do music as well, um, during this lockdown, my art found its profoundest expression in painting. And that sort of came across in this piece, which sort of is a kind of meditation on providing empathy and standing with people who do not want to share their stories of sexual violence that have happened with them. And I sort of think that art can participate as a fruitful dialogue, as as a space that allows us to be empathetic towards each other, and to be able to voice a certain kind of um, fortitude towards one another. And I see that happening around us, even though it's the pandemic and we cannot allow ourselves to visit exhibitions and shows. But I see that happening in various kinds of digital platforms. And that's good because it then makes us connected with each other in a way. Uh, I do think that we are in our own physical space, but in terms of engaging in a dialogue, I think it's flowing around all of us, and it's a thing that we must hold on to, a sense of hope, a sense of belonging to one another. I think in these dire times.
So for me, I think making art is making something invisible visible. So in terms of sexual violence, for example, in this exhibition, I don't think that only the visible violence could be seen as violence. So I'm trying to find a new expression to make invisible visible. Like, we're growing up with a lot of body shamings, and that is totally invisible and cannot be depicted in a picture. So I think art is something could be used as a weapon to express this kind of invisibility. And only that visibility can give voice to the voiceless. I think that is what arts can do for this suffering, for these victims, or to give voice to the alliances.
I I didn't intentionally set out to make art about the subject of sexual violence, and I had my studio is on campus, and so pre-COVID times, I had an undergraduate student walked by and was like, "I'm so nervous to tell you this, but I wanted to say thank you for making art about this subject." And I had nothing in my studio at the time about it, and I think it made me realize that there are in allies, survivors, people who have an inkling of understanding of what sexual violence and how how a person carries sexual violence with them. um, I think they see those little aspects in art and they understand, and it is that kind of sharing of art that, I mean, art is meant to be shared, looked at, discussed, experienced together, um, and that's its function. I think is to be to be seen and to be so that you can, and yeah, to be seen and to share. And I think you don't always know that that's what you're intentional. You don't always know as a maker what you're making. It's intuitive a lot of the time, and but I think that makes it more genuine and authentic. And then other people pick up on that, and then that's how the conversation kind of grows wider. And then people, it. I just think about if I had been a 15-year-old girl and seen people making art about this, that just how differently that could have shaped things for me and my view of sex and relationships in the world. And that I think it's really powerful to be able to do that, whether intentional or not. That's the result is really, really exciting.
I just wanted to add that I agree with all of you. And once we create a piece of artwork, however personal or intimate the experience of creating it is. Once it's out there, it's not only yours; it's also part of the collective experience, and that's so wonderful about it. And so many people find relationships with that particular piece that you've created, and it's so gratifying to know about those experiences. It's the biggest gift that you can get um, as an
This
artist.
exhibit. So when we put out the call for artwork, we said that Bloom would be an exhibit themed around sex, sex ed, and sexuality and consent, which certainly there could be many exhibits on this topic. And so some of you have talked about sex ed in your statements, which people can view and listen to on Bloom's website. So please go there as well. But I'm wondering what sexual education looked like growing up, and was sexuality, was consent even involved in the sexual education, if you had this education at all, that you and your peers received. And I'm hoping, Maddie, that since this is something you do talk about in your statement, that maybe you could start us off on this.
Yeah. So I, not to just regurgitate my statement, but I had I grew up in an all girls religious, went to all girls religious school, Christian school. And though the message there was not necessarily abstinence, it was drilling in the fear of sex and everything that could possibly go wrong, and the banana and the donut demonstration, and these videos of seeing babies being born, which is just this fear of what that meant. And I think that maybe in turn that had an impact on abstinence, just to instill fear so that you don't do it. But consent was something that was a discussion like my friends and I came upon in college, that was just between us, and it was not in the form of education from, you know, qualified people at all. There was none of that. It was yeah, it was just, it was the fear of it. And so I think that when it's such a scary thing, you know, you don't know how it can go right. So how are you meant to always understand when it's in the gray area or it's full on wrong? And I think that that's really hard because um, it's hard to figure those things out on your own as you're growing up. And so when the education you're getting, it's like if you're taught to do math this one way, then someone's like, but you can do it this other way. And then it's like, what? We just learned it, that it was just solely, and it's also just this kind of heteronormative sex as well. And it's just, it was not at all inclusive. And it was just really scary. And I think that that's kind of sad because sexual interaction can go wrong and down the scary route, but it doesn't always go that way. So I think that my sexual education was just not a sexual education at all.
You know, when I was a kid, well, the things were in my country, the church and the government, they were like this, you know, they work together. And to talk about sex, it was a sin, a mortal sin, you know, you couldn't ever talk about that. In school, never. Anything happens in the school about these subjects, it was simply impossible, you know. Fortunately for me, my parents were very informed people, and they talk with the kids. There are 6 of us, brothers and sisters, you know, there I have a big family. And when we had some doubts or some questions, they just answer clearly, you know, without any kind of subterfuge or something like, okay, let's not talk about this or about that. Nowadays, I think through my experience, because I'm not young anymore, um, comparing with when I was a kid and now, I think the time now, it's much more, it's better, you know, and the prejudice, it's really away from my time when I was a kid, and that's good. It's good. It's important because it's normal. It's healthy, and it is what it is, and there's no shame on that, because this influence of the church and the religion, it's something always heavy, you know. It's something that should not interfere in the right values of the reality of life, because then there are the traumas, there are the consequences of violence, and there are a lot of mental problems. And if we can avoid that through the experience that we have from the past, that's a good, very important step to do and to go forward.
Yeah, I think I had a sort of similar experience like Miguel, and well, in my school there wasn't the any talk about sex education was had a sort of academic sobriety, as if it's sort of, you know, a textbook subject taught and understood and sort of like that. But at home, my parents would always invite conversations and dialogues, and that sort of gave me the kind of bearing on the experience, and to understand the confusion around it. And it sort of helped me in understanding what is the importance of consent, and how sexuality sort of delves into the entire equation, and how we can sort of comprehend what has gone wrong in the entire process. Because sometimes what happens is you don't realize that something has gone wrong in the process. So it's very important to have that sort of awareness.
So I got really complicated feeling that I'm the only one who received 0 sex education. And so during my school time, we received only biology education. The teacher told us what genital system looked like, but that is biology, that is not sexual education. So they don't tell us what sexuality is. And even our parents are so ashamed of talking about it. So my case is I received 0 education from school and my parents. And when it comes to consent, I think that is so irritating to talk about, because during my middle school, a lot of boys really enjoyed watching Japanese porn. And they all know a Japanese term. It means to stop. But the plots in those porns are those men are still having sex with those females, clearly stating that their refusal. Like a woman yelling stop and the man still continues. But the boys all thought was funny. So I think that is what Miguel said. This is a systematical and institutional sexual violence that people are super okay with this. And what is worse, that the girls are told that if you have sex, and even if you are a victim of a sexual violence, that means you are not clean anymore and you are contaminated. You're not complete anymore. So it is so horrible to think about it, that perception is actually part of our sexual education. And it's just so hard to believe that a lot of people just grow up like this. Men are told, oh, it's okay if a woman says to stop. And the girls are told, sex is something you should be ashamed of, even if it's forced upon you. So that is where my anger comes from. We don't have a right, clear sex education. And several years ago in my country, there are a lot of books talking about sex violence and sexual education. People try to use them in elementary and middle schools, but a lot of parents who just got so mad at these books. They thought this is not something to be taught in school. So there's a huge gap to come across before we even talked about consenting, because we don't even know what sexuality is.
Yeah, thank you. And that's interesting, the many different places where sex ed could have come in and been taught kind of through everyone's life, and where it did and didn't come in. I want to say thank you to all of our guests. Please join me in thanking and celebrating all of our artists. So thank you, Shreyash, Ayoden, Marikin, Maddie, and Miguel. Thank you also to our advocate tonight, McKenna. A very special thank you to Abby, to Anya, and to Reina, who are working the technology side behind the scenes tonight, making this all happen. And thank you to all of you audience members for joining us tonight. All right, that's all, friends. Thank you and have a lovely night.